What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazique, aka Unique Mazique, the hardest working man in sports and gaming. I'm a fight guy, Forbes contributor, and WriteForHeavy.com. I'm with my fellow fight guy, fellow Forbes contributor, and Boxing Manager of the Year candidate for 2019, Peter Kahn. What's going on today, Pete?
Brian, we're a little bit earlier today
Yes.
on Wednesday, May 13th for our Fight TV viewers and those watching us on YouTube. However, it's because of the UFC 171 event that's taking place in Florida, but obviously we'll get into that. But anyway, I'm doing great. How are you doing? I'm just happy to be here. Another show.
Absolutely, for sure. And we are powered by Fight TV and presented by Bet Online. If you're watching us on Fight TV, make sure you go to YouTube right now and search The Fight Guys so that you can subscribe to the channel so you can get all of the combat sports content, including I broke down every single fight for Wednesday night's event, UFC Fight Night 171, or if you want to call it UFC Fight Night Smith versus Teixeira. I have my odds and prediction videos for each one of those. So if you want to get a quick look before those fights start, it is there for you. But without further ado, let's jump right into round one.
So, Brian, here we are Wednesday, the second UFC event in a matter of 4 days. UFC 171 on the heels of UFC 249, right? This is Fight Night. And we are in Fight Night. It is happening just about 2 hours from now, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Mm-hmm. So you are the Fight Guys, UFC, and all things MMA experts. So listen, round one's yours, bud. Let's just get into it. Let us know your thoughts, picks, breakdowns, whatever you want to talk about. What do you got?
Well, I was really going to talk about those top three fights, and we'll start like in the main card. And one of the more intriguing matchups is Alexander Hernandez against Drew Dober. The odds for that particular fight are really tight. You have to obviously always make sure you're checking to see what the latest things are. The line, I don't suspect, has moved too much. But yeah, it actually has moved a little bit more in favor of Drew Dober. Right now, according to Bet Online, Drew Dober is a minus 134 favorite. And Alexander Hernandez has dropped down to a plus 114 underdog. Yesterday, they were both in the minuses. So even though Drew Dober was still the favorite, it wasn't as clean or as clear as the favorite. You weren't getting basically money back for betting on as much money back for betting on Hernandez as you are now if you pick him. I do like Drew Dober in the fight, but it is a very close one. We'll see what happens. Drew Dober's just on a tear right now. He's on on a win streak of 2 straight fights, and he had first round knockouts in both of those fights. So he's definitely on the move. In the co-main event, we have, this one's really interesting because Ovince St. Preux is making his UFC heavyweight debut. He's pretty much fought his entire career at light heavyweight, and now he's stepping up. Now he steps up to fight in heavyweight. He is facing one of the true giants of the division. Rothwell is 6'4". He got to cut weight to get to 265. So he's a big guy. It's interesting because OSP is the better athlete, but now he weighed in yesterday at 240. So he's going to be a fairly smallish heavyweight by UFC standards. But he does have I would say the athletic edge. But Rothwell, while his striking isn't aesthetically pleasing, it's kind of effective because it's so awkward, and he really only strikes to get in, to initiate a clinch or to get a takedown. Right. Once he's able to do that, he can kind of work his submission game. Right now, Ovince St. Preux is still the favorite, minus 129, according to Bet Online, and Ben Rothwell is plus 109 underdog. This is one of the fights I'm going with the upset. I kind of like Rothwell in this fight. Okay. One of the reasons why is because while Ovince St. Preux has shown himself to be just absolutely amazing at securing the Von Flue choke, which is one of the rarest submissions you're going to find in mixed martial arts, he also is a little susceptible to submissions, especially chokes himself. He can get a little careless on the ground, and Rothwell's really good down there. So I like Rothwell as the upset.
So let me interrupt you there for a second.
Sure.
That's really interesting to me. And I'm sure it would be interesting to a lot of our audience that are primarily boxing fans, might tune in tonight and be looking for this rare choke. What is it?
The Von Flue choke is a choke that is administered from top position, which is generally rare because the leverage wouldn't normally be there to get the choke. But it's also called a shoulder choke. It's just essentially a headlock from the top where you're driving your shoulder and the top part of your arm into the neck of the person on the bottom, but you also have a grip from behind them, so it looks a little bit like a
forearm and like holding the.
Not a forearm, it's the shoulder area. It looks a little bit like the head and arm choke from the side, but it's different because it's done from directly on top, and it happens so quickly you can barely tell. And it almost looks as though the person from the bottom doesn't realize that they're being choked until they're almost out. Wow. Because you see more technical submissions. And anybody, if you're familiar with mixed martial arts, or for our boxing fans who are not, when you see technical submission, it means the person lost consciousness before they tapped out or refused to tap out and lost consciousness. So you see a lot of technical submissions coming from the Von Flue choke.
What does it just come on quickly because they don't realize it so they can't tap?
It comes on quickly and they think they have time to fight. But they don't.
And the oxygen's gone.
And it's gone.
Gotcha.
So there has been some some push for it to be renamed the Von Preux choke because Ovin St. Preux has more submission wins with this maneuver than anybody in mixed martial arts history. So he's great at it, but the chances of him being Rothwell that way are slim to none, I think. So, but moving on to this main event, which is very interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more about Anthony Smith a little bit later in the show. Just a fascinating situation.
Yes.
Scary in some ways too. He's taking on Glover. He's taking on Glover Teixeira, which is a very important light heavyweight bout because coming into this fight, Anthony Smith, who's already had a title shot against John Jones last year, he's ranked number 4. And he would like to keep his position to stay within striking distance of getting another title shot sometime soon. If he loses to Glover Teixeira, who's ranked number 8 and will be 41 years old in October, that placement will obviously be compromised. And the UFC doesn't like to get quick turnarounds for guys who lost in a title shot. If you get your title shot and you lose, you usually have to build yourself back up. You're going to have to win 3 or 4 more fights before you get another title shot. That's just the way it works. So Anthony Smith already had a rebound fight where he beat Alexander Gustafsson. Beating Teixeira here might put him in 1 more win away from getting another title shot. For Teixeira, this is probably his last real shot to move into title contention. Like I said, it'll be 41 in October. He's ranked number 8 right now, but a victory over Anthony Smith would probably make him a top 5 rated fighter, which might put him 1 or 2 wins away from getting another title shot himself. He also fought John Jones, but his opportunity came back in 2014. He lost as well, the unanimous decision. So everybody wants to get back and to get an opportunity to get a shot at the crown. So it's a pretty strong card overall. We did lose 1 fight today. Carl Robertson was the only fighter who missed weight. He was missed by a pound and a half.
Hey, so he didn't miss by COVID.
He didn't. No, he missed by a pound and a half, but he experienced some illness from trying to make weight. So if we're thinking back about Jeremy Stevens on Saturday, he didn't try to make weight. So he went in, strong for the fight. He ended up getting knocked out anyway. But maybe this is the kind of, this is how it works. Sometimes the fighters will tax themselves to make weight. And when they do, they put themselves in jeopardy. Sometimes they won't tax themselves to make weight. And they just have to deal with the, charges of being unprofessional, which a lot of times that might be the case. But it's still probably better than pushing your body to the brink and getting sick. So,
the interesting about UFC is that, you see these things happen under normal circumstances. So, you want to be able to say, well, was it a short camp? Was it short notice? Was it the inability or did he know he was already fighting on this date previously? And this really ended up working out where the fight never was canceled. They're keeping the date. It's just taking place in Florida. Or, what were the reasons? Did he even express reasons why he missed weight? And by how many pounds did he miss weight?
He missed by 1.5 pounds, so it wasn't egregious, but it was still missed. And I think he only missed by 1.5 because of whatever he did that day to try to get down.
I see. So he did try. So he's probably 3 pounds. Okay.
Yeah,
that was basically all he could squeeze.
He probably got to the hotel like that day or the 2 days before that, 3 pounds over or something, and was trying to get down.
You can cut 3 pounds the morning of, fairly simple. It must have been bigger than that.
I wonder if it's that he had already been trying to cut the whole week, and then he got there 3 pounds that day and couldn't go anymore.
Yeah, there's a point where the body will shut down.
Yeah, and he might have, because when he got on the scale, he didn't look right.
Yeah,
he didn't look right. I mean, he didn't look as bad as I've seen some guys look, but he didn't look right. So, it is what it is. I'm glad. I'm hoping that he's safe and cool and can recover. A lot of times, man, guys will miss weight in these types of situations and they'll tax themselves. And I've seen them never really look the same afterwards. It happened to Renan Barão. Renan Barão was one of the best bantamweights in the world, and he struggled making weight at 135, and he had a couple bad weight cuts, and he just hasn't been the same since. So,
well, Brian, as people that are familiar with combat sports and really understand from a participant standpoint, the brain is what suffers when you push yourself to go beyond what your body will provide you from a weight cut standpoint. And there's a point where pushing it too hard and taking it to a dangerous limit ends up having an effect on the brain. And as you know, you start damaging the brain, there are just things that are just non-recoupable. So, it is what it is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'm looking forward to looking at UFC Fight Night 171. Also, make sure that you tune into the channel later on tonight on YouTube. We will be doing a live recap show, the same as we did for UFC 249, going through the entire card. So make sure you're there for that. With that said, we're going to go into our first between the rounds.
So, Brian, we are 4 days removed from UFC 249. Dominick Cruz,
yes,
was on the losing end of a referee stoppage. Referee came in, stopped the fight.
Yes,
and he on Fight Night felt that stoppage was premature.
Yes,
felt that he wasn't given enough latitude, and we talked about this.
Yes, we did.
Right, we talked about this, and we talked about the responsibility that the referee has to protect the fighter. First and foremost, enforce the rules. Second, protect the fighter.
Absolutely.
And if you're not returning punches and you're taking abuse, whether or not you're the toughest guy in the world, it is not up to you to determine how the referee needs to enforce the rules and do his job and protect you. The referee's job is to make sure, win, lose, or draw, you return home to your family safe and sound.
Yep.
It's his obligation. So,
best of his ability.
So here we go, 4 days later. It has gone from disappointment to accusation, insinuation, with Dominick Cruz expressing that he felt the referee, Keith
Peterson. Yeah. Yep.
Smelled of alcohol and cigarettes.
Yes.
And that somehow that influenced, that's the insinuation that influenced this stoppage. Not getting pummeled and not responding to punches being thrown, but the referee smelling of alcohol and cigarettes. One can argue that if he was drunk and smoking, he might have let you continue.
Right. He might have.
Did our producer just laugh out loud?
Yes, he did.
By the way, our lovely, beautiful producer Portia couldn't help herself right there, and she just yelped. Because if I was drunk and smoked, I'd just be like, "Hey, this is good. Keep going.
This is good stuff.
Let's see what he does."
Let's see how far this goes.
So here's what I'm saying, and I'm interested to how you respond in the championship rounds. But I really find it to Dominick Cruz's reaching a level of unprofessionalism that shouldn't be accepted. Look, he's that criticism he could receive a suspension for.
Yeah, it's actually kind of slander. It really is.
Look, it's no one's disputing his toughness. No one's disputing his grit. Okay. the one thing about MMA, UFC is that you can get stopped, you can lose. It's forgiving. They bring you back.
Yeah.
Okay. But
so, I mean,
But, and I'm interested in your response, but look, I'll wrap it up like this. You lost. You might have felt you're on the bad side of a short, premature stoppage. But you got to let it go. And you got to accept it. You got to move forward because the fans know what they see. The rest of the fighters know what they see. And I don't think many people have argued Dominick Cruz's position. So anyway, I'm interested in knowing what you have to say in the championship rounds, but that's what I got.
We'll get into the championship rounds, and we will. There was actually a response from one of Dominick Cruz's colleagues, a very well-known colleague, Herb Dean. So we'll break down what Herb had to say about
very respected
it.
Herb Dean.
Absolutely, the most probably respected. Yes. Maybe Big John's the only other.
Yeah,
Big John,
both right
for sure. So,
and by the way, Herb has been in a situation where he acknowledged immediately, apologetically, that he missed it.
Yes.
And he knew he missed it. And so, I'm interested to see what he has to say.
Absolutely, for sure. It's his comments are very insightful, so I can't wait to get into those there.
Excellent.
All right, so we're going to dip into round 2. So we're going to still talk about one UFC Fight Night 171.
Yes, fight of the night.
Fight of the night. So which fight do I think has the best potential to turn into the fight of the night? It really there's a couple fights here and there that I think have a little bit have that feel. You kind of know going in, right? Because you go by the different fighters, their penchant for fan-friendly fights.
Yes.
They, sometimes it's the position they are in their career right now. Do they feel like they have something to prove? Do they feel like they have a lot to lose? Because a lot of times the fighters who feel like they have the most to lose won't give it all. They won't go hard to produce that sort of fight. They go for the victory more than anything, right? Fight of the night for me, the one to watch is, and somebody can obviously come up and surprise us, but I really like the Drew Dober Alexander Hernandez fight as the fight of the night. Now, I will say this. Now, Alexander Hernandez has really, you want to talk about people who have been positioning themselves as a villain. This kid has been really feisty. And this is Drew Dober here on the screen here. But Alexander Hernandez has been really super feisty coming up as a contender at 155 pounds. Got humbled quite a bit by Donald Cerrone in not his last fight, but the fight before last. He was like talking trash to Donald Cerrone in the hotel, and Donald Cerrone told him, "Hey kid, I don't know what you heard, but whatever you heard is the wrong thing. I don't do that. I won't wait to the fight. I'll come up to your room. I don't do that." Right. And then he backs that up by beating the brakes off the kid in the actual fight.
I saw that. It's a very uncomfortable encounter.
It was.
When you start including hotel guests in your crossfire, it pisses me off.
Yeah, because those people are not fighting. They're not.
They're on vacation, business, families, and you start putting them in potential an uncomfortable situation. I don't like that.
No, I don't like it either. I don't like that either. So basically, he brings a lot of energy to the fight. But I think it's interesting because Drew Dober is the type of guy who is like, I gotta punch you. What you say has nothing to do with anything. At the end of the day, I still got to hit you. At the end of the day, I still got to get a takedown. But he has great fights. And so I think this one definitely has a little bit of that buzz. So that one would be my one to watch if we're talking about potential fight of the night. All right, so let's dip into our next between the rounds.
So Brian, this is all you. You and I have spoken about this. I know that this topic interests you because you found it to just be so out there and terrifying. And obviously it relates to tonight's card. So go for it.
Yeah, so this is about Anthony Smith. And this is actually not a brand new story, but I think it's getting some more light now because he's fighting tonight. But Anthony Smith, this was a month ago, about a month ago. He says he was at home and his wife wakes him up in the middle of the night and says somebody's in the house. And so he told this whole story. He told to Ariel Helwani, talking on ESPN. It was literally less than 48 hours after the incident. His voice was still gravelly from yelling during this encounter. And he said his wife wakes him up and says somebody's in the house. And he said he wakes up and there's literally a man in his house screaming to the top of his lungs. So he said he walks out out of his bedroom and he sees the guy standing like in a computer room, standing there with an odd posture, flexing at him and yelling until he loses his breath, gets his breath back and starts yelling more. And he was like, he saw the guy starts walking towards him. And he said at that moment, now, for anybody who's not familiar with Anthony Smith, this is Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith is 6'4", 205 pounds on weigh-in night. So which means it's probably more like 235, 240. And so this is not a little guy.
Right.
Okay.
Very imposing figure.
Yeah. And this is not a guy who.
And he's a trained fighter.
He's a trained fighter.
Sorry, you're between the rounds.
And a trained fighter on the highest level.
Yes.
Because I mentioned he fought John Jones last year. You don't fight John Jones unless you have already proven that you are an elite fighter. Right. So he says he's terrified, literally. And he's looking at this guy. He says the guy's like 5'10", 160, 170 pounds. But he's thinking to himself, nobody breaks into somebody's house at night with nothing but their hands. So he says he's thinking, I'm going to get stabbed, I'm going to get shot. Something's going to happen at some point before I get to this guy. He said, but I figure with 2 minutes, you get about 2 minutes of adrenaline unless you get a shot in the head or something. And I got to do this to protect my family. Now, in his house, he's got his wife, 3 daughters, aged 8, 5, and 2, and his mother-in-law. So, and the crazy thing was he was supposed to be gone that night. He was supposed to be gone. And so he charges at the guy, knocks him down. And he's fighting this guy. He says, I am giving this guy everything I've been trained to give him. Punches, kicks, knees. I'm using all jujitsu to hold him down. He said, this dude was so strong. He never, ever felt or dealt with a guy, wrestling a guy. He said, he just, no matter how much he beat him and kicked him, he could not stop him. He could not control him. And so, his wife got the kids and hit him and everything. And he's just beating him. At one point, his wife held the guy's legs down. And he told the guy, he said, do not kick my wife. And he said, and the dude just stopped and looked really calm at him and said, I won't. And then stopped kicking his legs but kept fighting from the waist up. And so ultimately he somewhat gets the guy subdued. He said all of this whole process took 5 to 7 minutes before the police ended up coming to
only
right. 5 to 7 minutes is an eternity in that kind of a situation. It's an eternity. And so it was crazy, but 5 to 7 minutes, if depending on what neighborhood you in, sound like a really quick response to a 911 call, depending on what neighborhood you in. Because I've definitely been in some neighborhoods where a 911 call did not come in 5 to 7 minutes.
Well, you mean 5 to 7 days.
Right, exactly. Flavor Flav said 911 is a joke. So, but not in this situation, thankfully. So the authorities come and they get the guy. And he said that by the time the authorities came, he said he said he's going off because he said he didn't know if his kids were safe yet. His wife had to tell him that. And the guy is sitting there in the house and the police have him, subdued at this point. And at this point now he's a different guy. And he, another part that really blew me because he didn't know, Anthony Smith didn't know what was going on. The guy who did this name is Luke Haberstron or something. They published his name. So he's laying on the guy's back. And he asked him, he said, are you alone? And the guy said, no. And he says, who's with you? And he said, so the guy just starts screaming out, Luke, Luke. So so at this point, Anthony Smith doesn't know who this guy is, but the guy was literally calling out his own name, saying that he wasn't alone, that this person was with him. Wow. And so he's holding him down, and ultimately the authorities come, and he's like a different guy. And the guy's sitting down, and he walks past him, and he said the dude just looked up at him and said, I'm really sorry, man. And he said it was just a bunch of emotions that went through him. He was like, he didn't know what or whatever to say. So you could tell he was like really still very shaken by the whole situation. And I just found it to be a fascinating situation. Obviously, it's horrible as a father standpoint. Like, that's like your worst nightmare.
Yeah, worse.
You know, that's the word, because as a father, your whole concept generally is you have to protect my family.
Of course.
And for somebody to put you in a position where you literally don't have a choice is just really amazing and just crazy. And so for him to have to now turn around and actually have an orchestrated fight a month later, something.
Well, yeah,
it's something. It really is. So just crazy. So
I'll have something to say.
I want to hear what you got to say about that. But it was very few times as a story just completely just grabbed me to the point where, I mean, the interview is 34 minutes. I watched every single second.
Right.
It was just crazy. So props to Ariel Helwani. He's fantastic at interviewing. He literally knows how to ask the question and just let the person go. He has a really good feel for when this person is just going to go, and he just lets them,
Was that a dig at me, Brian?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't even remember any of your interviews.
Yeah, because you say I'm always talking over them.
Oh, well, no. Hey, see, why are you bringing backstage stuff to the front stage?
I just want to make Portia laugh again out loud.
Okay. All right, let's jump in. You got me choking over here. Let me go. Let's jump into round 3. And you know what time it is. It is time to ask the fight guys. Use that hashtag, whether you're on YouTube, you're on Twitter, you're in the comment section. If you're watching it live, use the hashtag. We will see it. We will recognize it, and we will jump into or get into your questions. So the first one that we're going to do here, we had some really good ones this time. Really good ones. The first one is UFC related, and it comes from our main man, Sean Singletary. He has been one of our most consistent viewers, and definitely want to shout him out as well.
And always in the chat. I'm sure he's watching right now.
Absolutely. Give a shout out to Ness Mendoza as well. BK, Think Cap, everybody who shows up regularly for the show. We really appreciate.
Love those guys. Nick.
Yes, Nick as
Nicholas,
well.
Yep.
Yes, we appreciate you. So he says, what do you make of the heavyweight title picture with Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier, and Francis Ngannou? How would you approach untangling it? So right now there is quite the interesting three-way situation here with the heavyweight division. I think everybody in their right mind knows that Francis Ngannou has done way more than enough to earn a second shot at Stipe Miocic or whoever has the title at the time. But we have a situation where, honestly, I'm going to tell you something right now.
Tell me.
Daniel Cormier, I love Dan. Daniel Cormier is one of my favorite athletes, period. One of my favorite fighters of all time. But Daniel Cormier is to blame for this. And I'm going to tell you why he's to blame.
Tell us why. I'm like your hype man now.
No reason why Daniel should not have beaten Stipe Miocic in the rematch.
Okay.
Daniel, I still to this day don't understand what Dan was thinking during this fight. I don't. Daniel Cormier could have beaten Stipe Miocic just as easy, if not easier, in the rematch than he did the first time. But for whatever reason, he came out there with this thought process of, I'm going to win this fight striking. I'm going to take these shots. It doesn't matter. And ultimately, How old's Cormier? I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I was yelling at the screen at the time when he was doing it. And even his corner was yelling at him. They're like, Dan, take him down. And he had this locked in gaze.
How old is he?
He's 40. He's 41, I think now. Okay. And I'm like, and so he comes and sits down. He says, I know what I should have did. I know.
Right.
And I'm like, what did you not? Why did you do this? Why did you take an L? Like, at this point in your career, the only person who ever legitimately beat you was John Jones. And
maybe those physical reasons. Who knows? And I don't know.
I really don't think it was. I think it was a lot of times, and I see this more in mixed martial arts than I see it in boxing.
Right.
I see fighters get a concept in their head.
Yes.
That they want to prove a point. They want to win a certain way. And they end up putting themselves either. Well, I did see it with Terence Crawford because I really truly believe he did that with Kavaliauskas. But they get a concept in the head where they're going to win a certain way, and they get the. And I also saw with Tim Bradley, so maybe I do see it more because Tim Bradley with Ruslan Provodnikov did not have to take those shots, and this was a very similar situation. I don't think that Cormier needed to get into that kind of fight. So I say that to say, if he beats Miocic in the rematch the same way he beat him the first time, then now Miocic is not even in this conversation, and the only fight to make is Ngannou Cormier. If Cormier hasn't already walked away. Right. So, because I believe if Cormier had beaten Miocic, he probably would have just retired. Okay. The only way he would have fought Ngannou is because Ngannou knocked out his best friend, Cain Velasquez. I sound like I'm saying a WWE storyline, but it is. And so I think a part of him wants a piece of Ngannou after that. Okay. But so that's the thing. So at this point now, you have to have the third fight with Cormier Miocic. And then Ngannou has to fight the winner of that fight because
that's a great storyline right there.
Yeah. I think the thing of it is the question here is, what does Ngannou do? Because Ngannou just fought Saturday, and obviously he only worked 20 seconds because he knocked out Jairzinho Rosenstrike in 20 seconds.
Relax.
So the question is, what does he do in between now? Does he have another fight? Does he? Because here's the thing. Now he risks not being sharp because not only did you have a fight that kept getting pushed back for UFC 249, because that fight with Rosenstrike was set for months and it kept getting pushed back because of COVID-19. So then when he actually gets in the octagon, he only works 20 seconds. So does it benefit him to sit idle and wait on Miocic Cormier? Because that fight's not even signed yet.
Look, activity is a fighter's best friend.
Yes.
For many reasons, timing, staying close to fight weight, all sorts of things, mentally being busy. But recovery is also good. A lot of guys don't have to necessarily recover from fights. Some of them have to recover from the preparation. Yeah, well, I'm full camp.
He got to recover his knuckles because he just 20 seconds. That's the only thing that got worked for Ngannou.
I understand, but he still probably went through a camp and the whole bit. And I get it. Look, it's not perfect right now. Nothing's perfect right now. In a perfect world, in a traditional environment, we'd see the third fight. We would then have a fight for that. I mean, but right now things are moving in a different pace. And the UFC also has to at some point consider the money they're losing in live gate that helps compensate some of these shows. So they can't necessarily be, shooting their load on these big shows without being able to take advantage of 18,000 people at the MGM Grand or the T-Mobile Arena.
I think they're in a better position though than boxing because their fighters are already conditioned to being underpaid.
Whole different topic, my friend.
I really feel that's the case because they're already paying guys pennies. Like I mentioned with Jacare. Jacare said I needed to fight because I needed the money. Now, unless Jacare's just been throwing all his money out of the window, he's got a bunch of bad investments. The fact that a person that's accomplished as him is in that position, unless it's, like I said, horrible investment, is probably an indication that he hasn't been properly compensated. But like you said, whole different topic. My answer to Sean Singletary's question is, if I'm Ngannou, I don't fight another guy until I get a title shot. There's no reason for me to. I've already done it.
You're right. Because you're going to go through another camp.
Right.
And it's going to last 20 seconds or a minute, 2 minutes.
And it's still heavyweight. So
anything could happen.
Anything can still happen.
You get injured. You get injured.
Same, exactly.
You could break a hand knocking a guy out.
So I'm not fighting another person until I get my title shot and the money and the pay-per-view points that come with headlining that card, which I know I'm gonna do.
Yeah, and take the stress away. Take the stress away of this whole COVID-19 situation. Maybe we get further distanced away from that too, where you can have a traditional training camp and mentally things are different. So
and he's frustrated though, and he mentioned that. He shared that right after the fight. He even said a word that you don't often hear in post-fight interviews on the UFC, and they kind of hurried him along. But he said the word contract, which is, they don't really want you saying that, talking about the end of your contract in a post-fight interview. And they really did kind of hurry him along when he mentioned that, because that lets you know it's on his mind. Maybe, Bellator would love to have me.
Right.
and they'll pay
Right.
me stupid, ridiculous money because I'm
Right.
Francis Ngannou, and I'll walk right into a title shot.
True.
So that's one thing. So here's our next,
yes,
between the rounds, and this one is for you.
not between the rounds. Ask the fight guys.
Sorry,
Come on.
Ask the fight guys. It's not necessarily for you. It's for both of us. But I think there's a specific connection for you that you might actually dig. So this one comes from Vince Gotti. Sure. And Vince Gotti says he wants us, he saw our video about picking the perfect fight card for boxing to return on. And I definitely think this one's going to be much more up your alley because it is much more in line with your concept of fights that don't need to have a live audience. So he breaks it down from the prospect fight to the co-main event all the way up to the main event. So the prospect fight is...
He put together a card.
Yes, he did. Shojahan Ergashev, 18-0, 16 knockouts versus Malik Hawkins, 18-0, 11 knockouts. So that's the prospect fight, which is really it's a good fight. It's a pretty good fight. I can't really, get on Vince too much. You can tell he knows what he's talking about. He's done his homework. Yeah, and so our next.
Well, I mean, I've seen these guys. I've seen Ergashev on. He's with Dimitri Salita. I've seen him on Showbox plenty. Yeah, haven't seen Hawkins as much.
I have seen Hawkins. I liked him. I definitely liked him. Has nice quick twitch athleticism. You don't know that necessarily yet until the level of competition steps up. Fight against Ergashev would absolutely be that. So
I mean, with all things considered, why are these guys fighting? This is what I would pose to Vince.
It might be a little early, right?
Like why would they be fighting?
Because this is a make it. This is really a make it or take it, make it or break.
Unless it's a world title eliminator. Yeah. Or some regional belt to get you in the world ratings.
Right.
Why are you taking this risk against this competitive
level? Yeah.
Like I said, let's just say it's a great matchup. And let's say that there's a regional belt like the NABO, NABF, NABA, or something that's USBA, right? Yeah. One of those regional belts that now puts you in the top 15. But I believe both these guys are sort of either there or close to there anyway.
Yes, they got to be. It has to be. I know Ergashev is. So,
right.
All right. And the next one I think you'll really like.
Yes.
This one is Erickson Lubin against Dennis Hogan. I think
a little too much oil there.
Yeah, he definitely looks like
took the photo shoot to the next level.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to get on my producer for always picking the oily, muscular. For every picture we take. I don't see why we had to have that one. But
a little too much quarantine.
A little too much, I guess so. But Erickson Lubin against Dennis Hogan is definitely a good fight, and it's very, very realistic. Did you obviously Dennis Hogan's your fighter? You managed Dennis Hogan, so
all right. You want my thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can still show you the signed contract for that fight.
Yeah. I didn't want to say it. I wanted you to say it. So
So we had a fully executed signed contract for those two to fight, and then we were then offered for Dennis to move up to middleweight to fight Jamal Charlo for the world title, and we took that fight. So we do have a guaranteed comeback fight with PBC. I thought Dennis did a good showing of himself at 60 against maybe one of the top middleweights in the world, and made it a lot further than Lubin made it. Just saying, apples to apples. Yeah. Just saying.
Yeah.
But listen, let's just be real. Erickson Lubin is a top-notch fighter, definitely world champion caliber. I believe Dennis Hogan beat Jaime Munguia on April 13th a year ago. I was in the corner for that fight. I felt we got robbed. There's no secret there. We protested the WBO. We protested. Not one person that watched that fight scored it for Munguia. So Dennis should have been a world champion. The fight against Lubin was definitely, fans were starting to talk. There was definitely a lot of interest there. Look, it's a great fight. We'd still welcome it. I don't think we're going to get it. It was, by the way, going to be a WBC final eliminator where the winner was going to be the mandatory for the WBC title. I definitely think Erickson Lubin's a great fighter. He's a Florida guy, very familiar with him.
He's a Florida man?
Florida man. think he learned I think he learned from his loss. Kevin Cunningham trains him, great trainer. I think it'd be an excellent fight. It's two different styles.
Yeah,
two different styles. And listen, if Dennis proves something against Charlo, he can take a shot.
Yeah. It would be an interesting fight, very interesting test for Lubin, and a really, I would say, a position to kind of validate Dennis, because if Dennis can beat Erickson Lubin,
it's due to a world title shot again.
And I'm talking about even without the actual specific positioning. I'm just from the way people look at him.
Yeah,
you say, okay, you had a fight with Munguia that a lot of people feel that you won. Mm-hmm. You fought Charlo, that didn't work out.
At 60, you went up and fought at 60.
Right, but then you turn around and you beat Lubin. Then now that makes that's a very solid string of fight there. So
and what I know that people don't know, which I'll fill you in now, is the last month of camp, Dennis spent in Florida in our training camp.
Right.
And you know who he was sparring 2 times a week, 12 rounds each sparring session? I'll let you tell him.
Who Dennis was starting? No, I don't know who.
Yeah, you know.
Amir?
Banana, Jason Rosario.
Oh, Jason Rosario. No. Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No.
Yeah. So he was already conditioned, which we didn't realize until Rosario's destruction of Julian Williams.
And I think a lot of people learned a lot about Rosario that night.
Well, we knew he was heavy-handed because we were experiencing that in sparring.
Yeah.
And he was still heavy because he still had time out from his fight. So it was perfect because he was giving Dennis in hindsight. In hindsight, we're like, okay, Dennis was getting those big punches. He was getting conditioned because we didn't realize how hard Rosario hits because Dennis has a granite chin. Remember, Charlo didn't knock him out.
No.
He had him on.
I mean, he stopped.
He had him in. He had him in. Yeah. He had him on the clouds.
Yeah, I think a lot
out on his feet would be a good example.
It was just size, like he was hit by so much of a bigger man.
Sure,
that you know what? Because it was very similar, right? Tyson Fury didn't knock Deontay out, but that body shot and the way Deontay fell off of the force of the blow.
Right, but I would say this: Fury beat up Deontay.
Absolutely,
Dennis was fighting.
No, what I mean, I didn't mean that. I'm not comparing the overall developments of both fights and saying they were similar. I'm saying the impact of a bigger, stronger man's force, literally knocking a guy down with the force because of the size difference. I think that was. I
would compare Dennis's fight with Charlo to Kell Brook fighting Triple G. And Kell Brook still being able to go down and weight and be competitive.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Why not?
Because Kell Brook kind of wrote the blueprint on how to be more effective against Triple G. He just wasn't big enough to execute it. I don't think Dennis cracked any code with Charlo.
Right.
I feel like he was competitive, but he
didn't show a chink in the armor.
Yeah, and I think Kell Brook showed a little bit. It was like whoa, like he lit Golovkin up a couple times, and it was like, man, that was a bigger guy.
Right, I could have done something.
He could have done something.
Yeah, it might have opened the door for Danny Jacobs to wake up in the second half of their fight. That is,
I think he did, and I think it's the same way Paulie opened up the door for Maidana a bit.
Broner,
wanted the body with Broner.
So I'll leave it at this with that match. Yeah, I'd love to see that matchup. Al, we're still willing to do it. So what's the next one?
The next one, the final one, his main event is Alexander Usyk against Prince Charles Martin. Now, this might not be a fight that has everybody going, oh my God, but it's very appropriate. It's and I'm all for appropriate fights, even if they're not super exciting. Because when you make an appropriate fight, it sets up the super exciting fights. You need these fights to build up to the great fights. And the reason why I say this is appropriate is because Charles Martin is a former world champion. No matter how much you disparage his IBF reign, he just won an eliminator over Gerald Washington. So he's done enough to put himself in this position. Alexander Usyk is an upcoming guy who everybody looks at as a future world champion at some point. it just makes sense for these two guys to meet on the way. So is Charles? I mean, I'm pretty sure Alexander Usyk would be a massive favorite in this fight. I don't know what the odds would be, but I'm guessing minus 325, minus 315, something in that range, which is really pretty significant for a guy who has accomplished what Charles Martin has accomplished, and Usyk hasn't accomplished anything as a heavyweight yet. But I feel like it's just an appropriate fight.
It's a good fight. I mean, like you said, I mean, Martin earned his IBF mandatory standing to fight for the title again. It's going to be a while till he gets to do that. So they are going to probably put him in with another PBC fighter. So Usyk will never get that fight unless he was forced to, and he won't be forced to because he'll end up fighting in the matchroom. You know, he'll end up going through the matchroom path of heavyweights before he ever were to have an opportunity to fight Martin. But it would be a compelling fight because it would really help you understand where Usyk is in the scope of things. So yeah, from a matchup standpoint, good matchup, realistically happening, you know, probably zero chance, but definitely, you know, interesting enough to say, okay, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that fight because we're going to then get a really good idea. It's really not so much about Martin as it is so much about Usyk and understanding, like you said, where he fits in the overall scope of the heavyweight picture. Yeah,
because I feel like Martin's charge would be to make it about him. Because going into the fight, everybody's going to say this is about Usyk. Martin's
a big man.
He's a big man. And he's actually a pretty good athlete. And
Very good athlete.
He has some skills.
He has some pop.
Yeah, he does. So you never know. Like all it takes.
Actually, it's a good matchup.
All it takes is one.
Yes.
All it takes is one. So really good Ask the Fight Guy questions today. We're going to go ahead and jump into the championship rounds.
Talk to me, baby.
All right. The first one. Now we're talking about Dominick Cruz.
Yes.
And so I want to share what Herb Dean had to say. Herb Dean was there. He refed the main event fight with Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje, and I believe one other fight there. So just to set the scene for anybody who's never been to a mixed martial arts event, never been around the refs and any other personnel. I have been. The refs for those fights are around each other and close most of the night. Right, they're there.
They sit together.
They're sitting right together.
So they're up. They're sitting together.
Time, right,
front row, inside the.
I mean, even when they get up, if there's a back area in most arenas that is specifically kind of for them. So even when they get up, they're either there or there. Right, so they're around each other. Right, so it's not like somebody just comes out the back and none of the refs have seen him all day.
And Brian, just to add context to what you're saying, and not to jump in, but just to piggyback that, before every bout starts, the commission ends up having a meeting with all the officials.
Yes.
So they're all on top of each other, standing there in a meeting with the executive director, talking about the evening, going over assignments, who you have, what you have, just whatever the marching orders are. So they're all there.
Yeah, and anyone who follows Herb on Twitter will see before every event, Herb tweets out his assignments. He says, "This is what I'm working tonight."
Yeah.
You know, I'm just going to say this before I put his quote up. Herb is an absolute credit to the mixed martial arts and combat sports world. He is not only one of the best referees, if not arguably the best referee in mixed martial arts. He offers a certain presence that is really hard to quite define. All I know is that it's a positive in every way, even when he does something that you might not agree with. Right. So I'm going to put up the response he had to Dominick Cruz's insinuations, accusations, whatever kind of Asians you want to have. This is what he said. So he says, as far as the accusation, I didn't smell alcohol on Keith Peterson. Keith Peterson was around us all day. And I tell you this, if any of us suspect that someone's been drinking the day of a fight, there's no way that any official is going to let that pass. We are going to call someone out. This is a very serious job that we do. Now, second side of that is I excuse really anything that fighters say or do in the moment of a loss because people want to compete so bad. And to compete at this level, it takes more than anyone knows. I've had a fighter angry with me or push me in the moment, and I will walk away. And then when I see them later on, and they're on, everything is all right. So there's two parts to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So first and foremost, he pretty much refutes Dominick Cruz's insinuations that
Mm-hmm.
Herb Dean was drinking, or that Keith Peterson had liquor on his breath or cigarettes, which I don't even know what the cigarette part means, because I'm pretty sure
Well, maybe they just go together. Maybe you're just having a drink, smoking a cigarette, just hanging out.
When you're trying to paint a certain negative picture of somebody,
yes,
that helps.
Of course.
But at last I checked, you could probably smoke a cigarette and still properly referee a fight. So I don't know, but that's what I thought. But so he pretty much just throws that out, says that wasn't the case. And then he also talked about some of the things that Dominick Cruz said, like there in the fight, and maybe some of the issues he may have had with Keith Peterson right there in the octagon. But here's the thing. I totally understand what Herb Dean is saying about what fighters say in the moment. So I would attribute that whole concept that he's saying to, or I would link it with what Tony Ferguson did with Justin Gaethje. It was in the moment. Justin Gaethje came over there to kind of hug him or whatever, congratulate him way too quickly for him right after a fight was over. And he pushed. I did a whole breakout video that we posted about it.
We talked about
I understand that because it was right in the moment. And then literally 2 to 3 minutes later, Tony Ferguson's calmed down and now he's Tony. And he's like, good fight, guy, whatever. His fight's over. The adrenaline has dropped a bit. It makes sense, right? But this is not that. This is Dominick carrying this on days after you took this L. And it really, to me, does not put him in a positive light at all. And Herb Dean did say something that I did include in the quotes that I must disagree with. He talks about how insightful Dominick Cruz always is as an announcer, and then even when he talks about the rules of mixed martial arts and the way it should be ref. I don't think Dominick Cruz is a horrible announcer, but I do think that I've always felt that sometimes he's got this tunnel vision, and he only thinks about the sport from a fighter standpoint. And he doesn't think about it from a viewer standpoint. He doesn't think about it from a referee standpoint. He doesn't think about it from any other standpoint than his own. And I understand that you're a fighter in an individual sport, but you can't be so selfish with your perspective to think that your point is the only one that matters. And I see this in so many other industries. People feel like the world or the island that they live on is the only island in the world. And it's not that case, not that way. And this is a perfect example of that. He wants to dictate to Keith Peterson how he should do his job because the way he wants him to do his job best benefits him, or so he thinks.
Right.
And so I don't agree with that part of the assessment because I think he is a little bit tone deaf and has some blinders on, which I also understand. To excel in an individual sport to a degree, you have to have some of that. But I also think that there is an off switch for that has to be flipped, and Dominick is in the dark. He can't find it. Got it. So that's pretty much my take on that. So I would urge Dominick to stay classy because the liquor and cigarette stuff just makes the L you took look even bigger. It's like you like Laverne and Shirley now because it's the big L on your shirt.
I love these throwback references all show.
Yeah, I just rest in peace, Penny Marshall. I love you. So let's go to our second.
Yes. So here's what I have to say on this scenario. Okay. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much debate that you were looking for other than my thoughts.
Right. Just,
as a father of three, who has 3 boys, 18, 13, 11, not as little as Anthony's. And I have a mother-in-law under the roof, my wife, and my dog, Rocky. It's my responsibility to make sure everyone's safe. When I first heard the guys standing there screaming, my first thought was, who went and checked on the kids?
Yes. Yep.
Like, before charging him, I would wonder, where was he first before screaming?
Yes.
What did he do? So my mind would be racing. Then, the first thing that came to mind, I know you think it's some sort of demonic possession. I'm thinking it's like bath salts. I'm thinking it's just some sort of drug that will make you, like we've seen, eat a man's face off or have some superhuman power, do things that you don't even remember, whatever the case is. Crazy story, traumatic experience. I think it'll have zero effect on him doing his job tonight in the octagon. I don't think it'll even play into it. I think he's, like you said, or at least referenced to me prior to talking about it today, that for a guy that fights, he actually felt nervous. Whereas in the fights, he's not scared to fight because he fights. You know, he might be scared to lose, but he's not scared to fight.
No, never.
But these factors, when you change the environment from the octagon to your study or home office, it changes the entire scenario in which you're fighting it.
Changes everything.
So your training kicks in because it's second nature. So you're able to be effective, but the mind has to adjust to the environment and wondering what is going on. At least in a fight, you know what's going on. Your opponent's there. He's trained to fight you. It's a competitive sporting event. You're going to fight, and there's going to be defined rounds. You know the whole. You know the rules, and you know the time frame, and it's not a death match.
Right.
In this case, someone's invaded your home. You're there to protect your family. You don't even want to fight them.
You really don't.
What if you get hurt? Like, there's so many things, right? Like, who is this person?
The thing of it was, one thing I did mention, he said that it was really interesting that this was the night that this happened. He said, because 99% of the time, I go to bed with my gun and my nightstand next to me. He said, just this particular night, I did not have it there.
Hey, let me tell you something, though. Probably better off.
Right. Because,
what if he killed a guy? It might be, who knows?
Yeah.
This is definitely something that'll live with them forever.
Now you got to move.
This will never go away. However, I think that if anything, he'll be more comfortable being back in the octagon, doing what he loves to do, life back to normal, and having an opportunity to perform, earn money, move forward in his career. So I don't think it's going to have an effect, but for the viewers that aren't familiar, it's definitely an interesting, as Brian said, interesting side note story going into tonight as part of the narrative.
Absolutely, for sure. It's just, I really felt for him as a human being and as a father, as a man. I just felt for him, period. And he's a very interesting, different kind of a guy. He's not, when you think about fighters, when you look at him, he looks like a fighter. But when he starts talking to you, he's like, this is like an introspective philosopher, and I've always felt like that about him, because if you look at him when he's in like street clothes, or especially when he has on a suit, and he wears these glasses, he looks like the Agent 47, the African American version of Agent 47, who is the main character in the Hitman video game. That's what he kind of looks like. So he's just a very interesting individual, but this was just crazy. I really thought it was, worthy of discussion right before his fight. So that's all we have for you today. As always, we appreciate you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. We've been popping that up, letting you know to do that periodically through this show. We try not to call it out necessarily verbally all the time, but we do need you to subscribe on YouTube and also like the video and share. So for my man, Peter Kahn, this is Brian Mazique. I appreciate you watching as always. God bless and peace.